we're going to pick up with Indicator 7.1, Part 2, talking about the beginning of World War II and the war in Europe as it starts. Germany will invade Poland on September of 1939. Germany is going to break their agreement that they just did in the Munich Pact. Remember, we talked about Neville Chamberlain and Hitler and Mussolini all meeting and signing this agreement. Neville Chamberlain walks away from that meeting believing that he has found peace in our time, but Adolf Hitler is going to break that promise. He's going to use a new type of warfare, which he calls the Blitzkrieg. It's spelled Blitzkrieg. This means lightning war. This lightning war is going to just mow through the defenses that have been set up by Poland and eventually some of the other European countries like France. It uses planes, tanks, and the infantry. The planes will come in and bomb, followed quickly behind by the tanks, and then by the infantry or the foot soldiers marching through. So by using this attack, it's going to be devastating for the Allies, and it's going to severely hurt the British and the French. And the Germans are now beginning to make a move on all of Europe. Once the war starts, it's going to be up to the United States to try to aid some of their allies. Franklin Roosevelt wanted to help, and there were three ways that he's going to go about helping the Allies fight the Germans after the war begins in 1939. Three ways that he did without declaring war. The first one is called cash and carry. This is where the United States was going to sell military goods and supplies to Great Britain. The second one is known as Lend-Lease. This eventually would replace cash and carry when Great Britain ran out of money. And so we were pretty much loaning them the supplies in the hopes that they would pay us back. The third way that we were going to help the Allies was we were going to give them destroyers for bases. We would give them destroyer ships. In return, they would give us ports and bases in the British Caribbean islands. So those were the three ways that we tried to help the Allies out after the war begins. Of course, the United States is not in the war yet. So we want to make sure, though, that our allies are taken care of. And these were the three ways that Franklin Roosevelt sought to go about doing this. Okay, so FDR couldn't declare war, and he's shown that he is willing to help out, and we just talked about three of those ways. He wanted to show his commitment to the Allies. One of the ways that he did this was through something known as the Atlantic Charter. The Atlantic Charter was put together in 1941. The U.S. had goals in opposing the Axis powers, and it showed those goals in the Atlantic Charter. And it also showed that the United States was on Great Britain's side against Germany as this war started to take off. The Navy's job during this period was to protect all of the Lend-Lease shipments. We were losing ships to German attacks as well. So again, the Navy had to play a role in protecting those shipments as they went over to Great Britain. And by 1941, the U.S. was in an undeclared naval war with Germany. And they sent battleships to, again, protect those shipments and to make sure that none of our ships were sunk in the process. So this showed Roosevelt's commitment to the Allies and to Great Britain during this period. World War II begins officially with the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941. The events that led up to the surprise attack were mainly because the Japanese had had an embargo issued on them by the United States, mainly for oil and metal. And of course, the Japanese resented that fact. The other thing was that the Japanese thought that they could get a surprise attack on the U.S. and cripple them enough to keep them out of the war. Many of the ships were sank at Pearl Harbor, but fortunately for the United States, the aircraft carriers were not at Pearl Harbor when the Japanese attack took place, meaning that the United States still had some naval power left with those aircraft carriers not being at Pearl Harbor. Because of the attack on Pearl Harbor, the United States is going to abandon its policy of isolationism naturally. They're not going to keep to themselves. They shortly after the attack, they declare war on Japan. And then because of the United States declaring war on Japan, Japan and Germany had an alliance, and Germany would declare war on the United States. So now the United States is officially in the war, and it's all because of the attack on Pearl Harbor by the Japanese.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy, the United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan. It is obvious that planning the attack began many weeks ago. During the intervening time, the Japanese government has deliberately sought to deceive the United States by false statements and expressions of hope for continued peace.
The attack yesterday on the Hawaiian Islands has caused severe damage to American military forces. I regret to tell you that
Over 3,000,
American lives have been lost.
no matter how long it may take us to overcome this premeditated invasion, the American people in their righteous might will win through to absolute victory. Because of this unprovoked, dastardly attack by Japan, I ask that the Congress declare a state of war.